Do you want to be a technical designer? Maybe you just want to know what a technical designer does. We had the pleasure of chatting with System Era Softworks' Aaron Biddlecom at this year's PAX West. In this video, we chat about Aaron's journey to becoming a technical designer, and we also get to hear about what a typical day is like working on Astroneer. Originally released into early access in 2016, Astroneer is a sandbox adventure game where you explore new planets, terraform them to your liking, collect resources, and build and expand your base. The game has received steady updates since, culminating in a version 1 launch on PC, Xbox, and PS4 in 2019. Let's get into it. We are Ask Gamedev, and this is how to become a technical designer. Welcome back. We make videos on how to elevate your game development and inspire others. If after watching this video you want to continue the game dev conversation, check out the video description for a link to our Discord server.
My name's Aaron Biddlecom. I'm a technical designer with System Era Softworks. We make a game called Astroneer, which is a space exploration survival game. Sometimes we describe ourselves as the Play-Doh to Minecraft's Lego. So our game is all about kind of building with the terrain, sculpting with it, and then using that to gather resources and build out different items to help you explore and survive. It's been pretty wild change. So when I started with the company, they had just launched out of early access. And at that time, I think I was the 7th person at the studio. We're up to 25 people now, 2.5 years later. And the game has really grown just as much as the studio has in that time. So over the course of early access, we built out a whole new set of pretty big gameplay systems, new systems for base building and power management, new systems for how the planets themselves are generated. And so it's almost a different game when you see it today than what we launched with in early access. It's gonna probably depend on the studio itself. I don't think there's one agreed upon standard for what a technical designer is. But generally it's gonna involve some of the more programming centric aspects of design, whether that's scripting with something like Blueprint in Unreal, which is a visual scripting editor, or C# in Unity, or even C++ working in the engine itself. And you're using that to build out complex gameplay systems that sort of live in the code, right? So if you think about something like a platformer, the arc of Mario's jump, right? That's defined through the sort of mathematics of the physics that you're going to use for that platformer. But the game feel of that is very much rooted in design, right? What makes a good jump is very different than what makes a physics system perform well, right? And so your technical designers are generally going to be kind of that intersection where they understand the mechanisms of how the physics works to get you a jump, but they also understand the play experience goals that you have for that jump that feels good to the player. And so that sort of cross-discipline understanding allows you to bridge that gap. So for a game like Astroneer, that's working on things from the vehicles themselves and how they handle, and everything from the sort of performance tuning of the suspension and the weight and all of those things, to the new jetpack item that we have, and what the interaction is going to look like that. How do you control it? Are you using, in our case, the space bar? Or are you going to have a special dedicated key? All of those sorts of things. As well as working on some of the really complex systems like the crafting economy and the crafting modules that you use to create different resources. So all of these different kind of spaces all share in common that highly technical aspect. So in our case, it's going to be coming in, it's going to be looking at, we use software called Jira, which is task tracking software that basically tells you what tasks, what bugs need to be fixed, and where your time should be focused. And so I'll check that to see what things I should be working on if I'm not just jumping on something I'd already been doing. And then from there, the kinds of tasks I'm going to be doing, for instance, with the jetpack, if I'm building a prototype, it's going to be working in the editor, in Blueprint, setting up different behaviors, trying out different interactions. Am I using the spacebar? Am I using specially mapped keys? That sort of thing. Tuning it, adjusting it, scheduling play tests with the rest of the team to gather feedback about how well the prototype is working, what adjustments need to be made. It's going to be occasionally working in meetings with the rest of the design team and kind of digging into a design problem that we're trying to solve, also figuring out what our priorities are going to be for the next update and updates several months out. Sometimes it's going to be scheduling a meeting with the leads of the rest of the disciplines to show off a feature, to get it signed off on for moving it forward to the next stage, where usually I'm going to be paired up with an engineer who's going to collaborate on actually implementing it into the game proper. So we try to avoid with a prototype putting that directly into the game and shipping it, because as a designer I want to focus my time on the play experience and making sure that's nailed. Not so much on is it good for the frame rate, is it play well in multiplayer, and those sorts of things. And so going from prototype into implementation, the engineer is going to kind of take over actually getting it into the game in a way that performs well, is stable, and all of those things, while keeping the feel and the play experience that the prototype nailed intact.
That's one day.
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, they can be pretty busy days. I think like anybody who wants to work in games, loved it since I was a little kid. I originally thought I was actually going to get into it as a writer. I went to a creative writing program in high school. And then that transitioned into, briefly I was looking at linguistics, and eventually ended up at DigiPen right after they started a game design program. Bachelor of Science in Game Design, which was kind of a hybrid between programming and design. And from there I ended up with an internship with a small indie studio here in Seattle. Was there for 3 years from the beginning of their game to launching. Briefly sidestepped to working in VR on enterprise software before then coming to Systemera, where I've been for the last 2.5 years. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got from one of my mentors at DigiPen was that it's not enough to be good and it's not enough to be known, they have to know that you're good. As much as I pride myself on the skills that I've developed and the work that I've put into becoming a developer, a lot of it is also just putting myself out there. There's a lot of networking involved, taking every opportunity you have to meet other developers and speak with them and form those connections, so that when an opportunity does rise up, your name is there to be put forward, right? And then you have to prove yourself, right? Like, that can give you the opportunity, but you still have to have the skill set that you've developed to take it. The number one piece of advice is learn to program. And even if you're really focused on game design, you're not interested in engineering, part of the nature of design in general, and technical design specifically, is recognizing that what you do as a designer is programming, right? Understanding the logic of how a rule set works and how you can set the parameters for the play experience, what the player can do, what they can't do, that's all what programming is. And so knowing programming is really just an incredibly powerful tool for you to express your design intention. So like the number one piece of advice there is don't be afraid of it. Don't think it's all math and calculus and all these things that maybe you didn't gravitate towards in school. I think if you're really design-minded, you'll often find the case that programming is a lot more intuitive than you think it might be. One of the biggest pieces of advice is how do you handle making mistakes is accept that it's part of the job, right? And that you're not a bad developer because you made a mistake. And the mark of a good developer is what do you learn from that mistake? On the design side, there's systems that I've shipped that looking back on, I would do very differently, right? Like our power system, we don't give you a lot of reasons to build up a bigger, more robust power infrastructure, even though we designed the system to support it, right? I probably would want to tune that differently. I'd want to have those opportunities that really incentivize you to build out the power structure. Those sort of lessons are the things that you get from playtesting, from being, in our case, a live game and seeing it in the hands of players, but it's also a question of prioritizing your time, right? We had a lot of systems that we needed to work on, and so we didn't always, I think, and in my case, I didn't always make the right call about where to direct attention with the limited amount of time that we had. Oh man, I didn't tune this the way that I really wish I had of. I'm a terrible designer right now. It's, you see what worked and what didn't work and you learn from that, and when you have the chance to make adjustments or do similar systems in the future, you remember that and you draw from that experience. I think it's really important, especially if you're just coming out of school, whether that's explicitly a game development program, high school, college, whatever it is, there's sort of this sense that because this is a creative industry, because it can feel like such a privilege to work in this industry, and you're so passionate about it, that you'll put up with things that you really wouldn't have to in any other industry, right? And that's not to say that you don't work hard in other industries. Emergencies are going to happen in anything you're doing if it's really valuable work. But you should know your own worth, and you should respect your own worth, and stand up for your right to have a real equitable work-life balance, right? And I think particularly for young developers, that's something that they don't realize is important until they get older and they don't have the same stamina they did when they're younger. Some large amount of developers exit out of the industry within 10 years. And so making sure that people who are just starting out are really pushing for having more healthy, stable work practices is something that's going to benefit the industry as a whole, right? We are woefully short on veterans, and part of getting those veterans to benefit their experience with us is just being able to keep them in the industry longer.
Thanks again to Aaron and System Era Softworks for the great advice. Astroneer is available now on PC, Xbox One, and PS4. For more Ask Gamedev, check out this interview with Yacht Club Games or this playlist on game development careers.